Certainly looking and exploring strategic partnerships. The data presented at ESD has created a lot of excitement, actually, and our discussions there with those potential partners are intensifying. So, we're confident there that there's a path forward.
All right, welcome back inside our proactive newsroom. And joining me now is Sarah Howell. She is the CEO of Arecor. And Sarah, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And also
Good.
joining our conversation today is your principal and investigator, Professor Thomas Pieber. And Thomas, nice to see you as well.
Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you both along. Exciting news from the company talking about a positive phase 1 clinical trial of AT278. These details were presented at a major diabetes conference in Madrid. So this is obviously pretty substantial news. And Sarah, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what this is and how it works.
Sure. So I might give you some high level here around
Yeah.
AT278, just describe what it is, and I'll hand over to Professor Pieber, who will be able to talk in more detail about the data itself and the real patient need here, which is what's really important. So, as we said, we're really delighted that AT278 was accepted for an oral late breaking presentation at the European Association of the Study of Diabetes. So this is a really high profile diabetes meeting about the next generation treatment options and care for people with diabetes. So it really goes to validate the real need and the importance of this data we'll talk about today. So just for everybody listening in today who might not have heard about this product before, and just as a reminder really, so AT278 is a ultra concentrated ultra rapid acting insulin. So we've taken existing insulin, we've used Arecor's proprietary formulation technology called Arestat to accelerate the absorption of insulin post injection. It's completely novel and unique. There are no other insulins that we're aware of, certainly no clinical data demonstrating an insulin with these characteristics. And the real challenge here is as you concentrate up insulin, it slows down its time action profile. It becomes much slower acting. And we know we need fast acting insulins to help people with diabetes better manage their blood glucose. And that's what we've managed to achieve here. And what's really important is there is a real unmet patient need here. There's a growing number of people with diabetes who require high daily doses of insulin. They're struggling to get enough insulin on board. So that means high injection volumes, multiple injections, multiple times a day. And there's a real drive towards next generation insulin pumps as well. So we want these to be much smaller and for much longer wear times. And quite simply, a concentrated ultra rapid acting insulin is critical for that effort. And that's what we've been able to achieve here and demonstrated superiority in this clinical data.
Yeah, Professor, maybe you can sort of give us some of that data the way you see it. Obviously, pretty exciting results.
Yeah, so we were testing this new insulin in insulin treated patients with type 2 diabetes. This is a population that definitely will need such a new insulin that's highly concentrated and fast acting. And the specific we tested this in a large BMI group. So we do know that patients with higher BMI do need larger insulin doses. And for those kind of patients, there is no fast-acting insulin available, which is highly concentrated. There's one concentrated insulin available, but that's very slow. It acts more like an intermediate insulin or basal insulin. And for this study population, this is really a value. And there's the interesting finding from our study, which was a phase 1 study, was that the speed of that insulin is maintained throughout all BMI groups. So usually the more obese you are, the slower your insulin gets. And this is the news here that this AT278 U500 insulin maintains its fast action profile even in people with very high BMI. And that all of a sudden opens a huge opportunity for people who are using higher doses of insulin, who didn't have a fast-acting insulin for their pump, for example, will have such an insulin in the future.
Yeah, Professor, this is potentially massive for people who are suffering with diabetes, the ability to speed up the process of having insulin within the body. I have two friends who are diabetic and both use pumps, and just the way they're always trying to work the pump to make sure things are where it's supposed to be. This sounds like it could be something that makes it a lot easier and a lot more efficient for diabetes patients.
Yeah, exactly. So currently, we have several limitations when it comes to using a pump.
Yeah.
One limitation is the speed of the insulin absorption when you, for example, need a bolus. And if you need a larger dose, the time till insulin is absorbed is even higher. With that new insulin, we can ensure that you have a very fast onset of action with this new insulin, independent of the dose you give and independent of the BMI you have. If we think further, this opens other avenues. So currently, insulin pumps are pretty large. So with a higher concentrated insulin, we can substantially reduce the size of insulin pumps, make them more discrete. And for those patients who are needing high doses of insulin, they have to change insulin every day because the reservoir is simply not big enough. And with an insulin that's now 5 times higher concentrated, of course, wear time would be 5 times longer, which is a substantial improvement in convenience and also in acceptance of pump treatment. And then along that, this insulin also, of course, is of interest for young, non-obese people, because if we can make now a new pump that's very small and discrete, this also would offer a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. In fact, that was my next question was about that. And I'm glad you answered that because I think that's a significant point. And Sarah, give me sort of the next steps for AT278. This is obviously some really intriguing data to step off from.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is our second clinical study for AT278. So we've also demonstrated in a previous phase 1 clinical study the superiority against those best insulins that are available today. So acceleration of absorption of insulin and a superior glucose lowering profile, which is absolutely key here in type 1 diabetic patients also. So we know, regardless of whether you're a type 1 or a type 2 diabetic, and as Thomas has just talked about there, regardless of your BMI, we know it's superior insulin against those best-in-class insulins from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk today. So we're really confident around its characteristics and its profile. And Steve, you just mentioned a couple of friends on insulin pumps in the US. Yeah. Actually, insulin pumps have the highest use in the US, but still there's only around 40% of type 1 diabetics use an insulin pump and less than 10% of type 2 diabetics. And we know that people have better outcomes and do better on insulin pump therapy. And it is a lot of the barrier to entry here is the size of these insulin pumps, as Professor Pieber has just spoken about, and their duration of wear. You can wear them for up to 3 days currently. So with AT278, 5 times more concentrated but very rapid acting insulin, we've got the opportunity here to break down some of those barriers, transition more patients over to insulin pumps and significantly improve their outcomes. Now, the 2 studies we've performed so far have been single injection studies, so we haven't performed an insulin pump study yet. So the obvious next step is to look at AT278 in the clinical setting when continuously infused over 3 days with an insulin pump. So that would be an existing pump as a proof of concept here to demonstrate that it can be the insulin that can unlock insulin pump therapy for children, smaller, longer wear, and also for those type 2s who in the US as well on average use 100 units of insulin a day. So it's just not practical for them to move over to insulin pump therapy. So we're in conversation with device companies. Obviously, there's a combination here of device innovation as well as AT278, looking at entering into strategic partnerships here as we enter into that next clinical phase here. So that study is under planning at the moment. So we're continuing to explore those strategic co-development options with device companies, and we hope to be able to enter into that 3-day insulin pump study soon.
Yeah. So is that the focus then for the company now moving into this fall and into the early 2025 is working on that part?
Yeah, absolutely. We're certainly looking and exploring strategic partnerships. The data presented at ESD has created a lot of excitement, actually, and our discussions there with those potential partners are intensifying. So, we're confident there that there's a path forward, and really, so we're focused on selecting the right partner here so that we can ensure that as treatment and therapy comes to patients, we know they'll have better outcomes and do better on AT278, and of course then be able to move forward to those value inflection points and return significant value to our shareholders as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both very much for updating us on what's going on. Very exciting news, and it sounds like it's going to be a pretty exciting fall and into 2025 as well. First off, Thomas, thank you. Good to see you, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Sarah. That is the Professor Thomas Pieber and Sarah Howell. She is the CEO of Arecor.